computer.
Okay, everyone ready? Let's get it on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for coming to class number 3. Let me just make sure my audio is got it. Okay, you got. Let me make sure that my audio is coming from my earpods, and I want to make sure the audio comes out well.
Well, I'm talking now, so now you can hear me if the earbuds are working.
No, it's not. So let me. Okay, here we go. There you go. Now.
He needs audio to work with.
Now, hey, yeah, here you go. Now, better. Okay, there you go. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Make sure it's all here. Okay, here we go. So we are in class number 3 of anti-Semitism, of combating antisemitism, outsmarting anti-Semitism. You know, and actually, you know, for us to outsmart a guy, big deal. But unfortunately, we're going to talk about sometimes, you know, the Jewish people. We can be sometimes our own worst enemy. So we all know that there's the land of Israel, and the land of Israel has been the Jewish eternal homeland forever. And then in 1948, the state of Israel, the modern government of Israel, was established. And ever since then, there's been criticism of the government of Israel. Am I in the picture okay? You guys on the phone, am I in picture? Okay.
Yeah, you're okay.
I only see the back of the phone. You can see me fine?
I see you, yeah.
You're kind of far away. A little far away.
From the camera.
Yeah.
Actually, now you're frozen.
What happened to my phone? Was I talking to myself?
You disappeared.
You were frozen, Rabbi.
Hello?
Marty,
You
you
guys hear me?
speak up to get your picture on the screen again.
I was frozen. That's not good. Something happened, I guess, with
Your bandwidth is being eaten up.
everyone's coming up as you don't see the picture on the screen?
Not now. All we see is the presentation screen, not you. Now your picture, your podium is there now.
My bandwidth is being eaten up. Okay, so hold on. So what I'm going to do is, yeah, okay, fine. That's okay. But okay, let me stop sharing screen. That's weird. I don't know why we're having having technical difficulties today with the bandwidth. Shouldn't be. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing screen, and we're going to try again. Okay, let's try again. And okay, everyone can see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try again. Sorry about that. I don't know, the internet is not behaving. Time to switch. Okay. So what I was saying was that ever since the government in Israel has been established in 1948, there's been criticism of the government of Israel. Now, what we're going to discuss tonight is criticism of the government of Israel fair, or is all criticism of the government of Israel anti-Semitic, or is there somewhere in between? And we're going to talk about the answer to the Jewish right to the homeland, and when to know when criticism of the government of Israel is anti-Semitic, or when it's just a criticism of a government. Okay, so we begin. What page is the first attack in the homeland? 83. Okay, attack in the homeland. 84. Sorry. The third segment of this course concerns anti-Semitism as it relates to the state of Israel. It is first necessary to clarify why so much hatred centers on Israel, and to identify methods of distinguishing between legitimate criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism that's camouflaged in the language of human rights. We will explore a distinction between anti-Semitic movements that exclude Jews and those that invite Jews to their ranks. Information that is relevant to understanding and facing opposition to Israel in the broader context of anti-Semitism. Okay, so before we spoke about why there's anti-Semites, let's get into the land of Israel. Everyone knows the land of Israel is considered the Holy Land. Let me click over here so the thing can move. And here we go. Why does so much hatred center on the land of Israel? And we're going to talk about this historic, and we're going to talk about modern. Because after this lesson video, there's a fantastic text from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, which discusses first. So first, we're going to have a video about anti-Israel bias in the United Nations, and we'll see just how slanted it really is. Here, I'm going to put this on. I'm going to mute my microphone. I forgot to hit record. So, okay. No, I'm not starting from the beginning. We're not starting with the video. That's for sure. All right. So it is what it is. Sorry, guys. So the problem is this: you can't go and say I hate the Jews because, or I hate these people because, no reason. You have to, if you're a upstanding, dignified person of society, you have to give a reason, right? I don't hate Jews, and I don't hate Israel. It's just there's this problem, right? So Haman, for example, right? He came and said, "Why do we have to destroy the Jews? Because the Jews are a different religion." Right? And we said Christians did it, deicide. Muslims say, "Oh, they despise the Jews because he didn't accept our God." In the 19th century, it was because they're a different race. They're against science. In the Soviet Union, the Jews were counter-revolutionaries, right? They weren't comrades. So now society has progressed, and now we care about human rights, and we care about how people are treated. So if an anti-Semite wants to fire up people, what does he do? He accuses the Jews or Israel of being the absolute greatest violator. There's no greater violator of human rights than the state of Israel. And they say because we're refugees and we kill apartheid, they compare Jews and Israelis to Nazis, and the list goes. On and on. Now, it's important to point out, by the way, that Israeli government is a government run by human beings, which means they're going to make mistakes and they're going to do stupid things. And it's okay to be critical. Just because it has the Israeli flag on it, it doesn't mean you have to approve of everything the government of Israel does. You're allowed to criticize. We come from the United States. We invented criticizing government. That's what we do. Reagan told the joke that this American guy and the Russian guy were talking. So the Russian said, "Why do you think your country is so great?" So he said, "Because Americans said I can go up into the White House and I can go into the Oval Office and bang my fist on the desk and say, Mr. Reagan, I don't like the way you're doing your job." The Russian said, "Oh, I can do that." "You can?" "You're sure." "I can walk into the Kremlin, go into whatever office they have. I go to Krasnov and bang my fist on the desk and say, I don't like the way Reagan's doing his job." Right? Right.
The other part of that story is I don't like the way you're doing your job, and then they carry me out on a slab.
We have the same thing in Russian Express. Don't leave home.
Don't leave home, exactly. So I was telling the American Express, don't leave home without it. Russian Express, don't leave home, period, right? So you see a figure 3.2. This was a study done by the Melbourne Group. This is on page 87. Which of the following best describes you? You have generally pro-Israel, and supportive of the current government policies, generally pro-Israel but critical some, generally pro-Israel but also critical of many of the current Israeli policies, or generally not pro-Israel. So if you see, following that, 59% are pro-Israel but critical of at least government. I think anyone who's open-minded individual can state, I'm pro-Israel, but I don't agree with everything the government does. I don't think it's a problem with it. I think actually that'd be healthy in this country too. If a Republican can say, and I don't agree with most, but one thing is good, or vice versa, I think it's good. Just because you ascribe yourself to one party, right? If you're Jewish in the state of Israel, doesn't mean everything that the government does has the stamp of approval. So if that means that some criticism of Israel is fair, so how do we differentiate? The question on the screen. How do you differentiate between a legitimate criticism of Israel and criticism motivated by anti-Semitism? Let's have some of you guys chime in. Ira, what do you say? We'll do the in-person because they get precedence because they're here. Ira, what do you say?
Josh, I don't really know that much about Israeli politics.
Me neither.
So, and a few weeks back we were talking about that this one's conservative and this one's liberal. Those two terms in the United States in one meeting, in Israel, I think are totally different. So I don't know that much about Israeli politics to criticize the government.
But not talking about you. But if someone's criticizing Israel to you, the question on the screen is, someone is criticizing Israel to you. You're a Jew, you're wearing a yarmulke, whatever it is, right? And how do you think we can differentiate between the person is criticizing a government that happens to be Israel, or criticizing Israel because it's the Jewish government? Michael J., what do you think? All right, let's get some, while they're thinking, let's get some guys online. Go to the peanut gallery. Larry, you have an opinion? Larry always has an opinion.
My opinion is you get two Israelis together talking about the government. There's at least three opinions going around right there, But
so
what it boils down to is you can criticize their actions based on how it affects you as an individual or how it affects the people that you care about. But if you criticize somebody in the government because they are who they are as opposed to their policy, then you're not really looking at you're not being objective. Let's put it that way. You're probably.
I think Larry raises a very good point there. Larry said, they can't hear what you said. I have to repeat. So Larry said that if differences between criticizing the policy and the person. I remember when I was younger and I was taking a train. I was in Europe. I forgot we were taking a train from where to where. Met my friend and I, and there was this German guy on the train, and this German guy is telling me that the Americans and the Israelis, we perform genocide. I'm like, you realize where you're coming from, right? Right, the land of genocide. You're going to tell me that we're performing genocide? I think you forget what genocide means. Right? Okay, so let's look at some of the things the Medrash says, and then we're going to get into it. We're running very, very, very late. Let's go. Okay, so number one is the number one clue to know is if it's anti-Semitism or fear criticism, is a double standard. If the criticism is only leveled at one person or one country, one government, and not the other government, and they do exactly the same thing, then it's a double standard. Look at the Midrash in Kohelet, which talks about man in Mekatron. No one knows who it was. It might be a pseudonym or pen name. He wrote, because after the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Emperor Hadrian outlawed circumcision and outlawed the observance of Shabbos. So he said, if you despise circumcision, then you should kill all the Arabs. Arabs also believe in circumcision. If you despise Shabbat, then why don't you kill? There was a group of people that weren't Jewish. They lived in the land of Israel. They adopted some Jewish practices. They're called the Kuthians or the Samaritans. Then you should kill them too. You just hate the Jews, and therefore, so you're gonna get punished for it. The Hadrian try to say, no, I don't hate the Jews. I just hate their practice. The fact that they mutilate bodies, that's wrong. Or the fact that they're lazy, they don't work on 1 day a week, that's why I hate them. Okay, then why don't you do the same to everyone else? The fact that it's always it's only one way. There's an old joke, right? This American, this English guy, and this Israeli guy are captured by terrorists. So the terrorist, before he says we're going to kill you, goes to the American and he says, what's the CNN reporter, whatever. Sorry, the joke based on he's a CNN reporter. He says, "What's your last wish?" He says, "I'm an American. I want a hot dog, fries." He says, "Okay, sure." Well, the guy's a BBC reporter, and he says, "So what's your last request?" He says, "I want a microphone. I want to do a report. Everyone should know. I want to." Says the Israeli guy says, "What do you want?" "I want you to kick me." Terrorist says, "What?" "Yeah, I want you to kick me." Sure. He lines up and he kicks the Israeli hard, and as the Israeli is rolling over, he pulls a knife out of his sock and he kills the guy. He pulls out a gun. He shoots a terrorist. So the American CNN or BBC reporter afterwards said, "Why did you ask him to kick you? Because otherwise you'd report Israeli aggressor kills." Like I needed them to exactly. Right. So actually, Hadrian, when he received this letter, wasn't very happy. He tried to find the author. He couldn't find it. So, if Israel, let's say Israel is guilty of human rights, let's say, and you want to criticize it for human rights, fine. It's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is when you have not one other country, when you have multiple other countries doing a lot worse, and the whole world is mum, then that's a problem. How can we take your criticism seriously? So when you have people, organizations accusing Israel of human rights, but give China a pass with they're hitting the Muslims, right? What's going on over there? China has concentration camps.
But they're not called concentration camps. They're called re-education facilities.
Right. That's the head of education inside, so it makes it okay. Right. So when you think about it that way, that's probably not human rights. That's guiding it. It's probably anti-Semitism. So it says, we have. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I think it was Powell or Lowell something. He was the head of was it Harvard? He was the head of Harvard in the 1920s. So they didn't want to let Jews in. Why? I asked him why. So he says, because Jews cheat. So some people challenged him. He said, "Don't change." He said, "Non-Jews cheat also." So he said, "Don't change the subject. We're talking about Jews." Yeah, do Jews cheat? Yeah, right. But I think you can see straight through it that it's anti-Semitism. That's not. That's what like Hitler and Stalin did. You only blame the Jews. So Nathan Sharansky came up with this idea, and it's accepted worldwide. It's called the 3Ds. You see in text 3 on page 89. It's called the 3Ds. Okay. D number 1 is test of demonization. When the Jewish state is being demonized, when Israel's actions are blown out of all sensible proportions, when comparisons are made between Israelis and Nazis and between Palestinian refugee camps and Auschwitz, that's not a legitimate criticism of Israel. Right? So, for example, if Mexico was shooting rockets at San Diego, could you imagine Tijuana started throwing rockets at San Diego? What would the American government do? Exactly. It would be called the new Mexico. right? It wouldn't even be, right? But Israel has to show restraint. And Israel, barbarians. Israel drops leaflets before they, right? Second D, double standard. When criticism of Israel is applied selectively, when Israel selected is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get here we go. When Israel is singled out by the United Nations for human rights, but they don't talk about China, Iran, Cuba, Syria, North Korea, right? And when Israel's Magen David Adom, the ambulance service, is the only ambulance service in the world that's denied admission to the National Red Cross, I feel like I sound like Jeff Foxworthy. You might just be a redneck, right? Right? You might just be an anti-Semite, right? Number 3, test of delegitimization. When Israel's fundamental right to exist is denied, among all the peoples, that's anti-Semitism. That's what it is. When you say the Jews have no right to be, that's anti-Semitism. That's not criticizing a government. Like Larry said, your problem isn't the policy, your problem is the person. All right, so now they have a better understanding about Israel-related anti-Semitism. Now comes the question, what can we do about it? How do we combat it? How do we talk about it? Someone comes to you and says, oh, Israel is violating human rights. So obviously, it's important to strengthen the position of Jews in Israel economically, by you go to Israel, you pour your tourism dollars, you buy Israeli things, support Jewish organizations. And also it's important to understand what was discussed in lesson 1, that the security of the land of Israel comes from really supernatural protection. But let's talk about let's talk about how today's lessons are going to talk about how should we approach the problem. The truth of the matter is, we're not going to do. Our biggest problem isn't the Gentiles, anti-Semites. That's not our biggest problem. Because if only the only anti-Semites in the world were Gentiles, then okay, whatever, they're Gentiles. We have a different problem, and our problem is. Oops, I think we're a little behind here. Our biggest problem is that there are Jews that hate Israel, and what happens is now you have the UN or all these BDS organizations that now say, hey, the book is right there on the desk. No, but I'm in the middle of the class. I can't talk. Okay, so it's back there. So like those people who say, I can't be a racist. My best friend's black, right? So the same thing is, I'm not an anti-Semite. I have one of the people who's part of my BDS movement, whatever it is, he's Jewish, and that gives them legitimacy. So how do we prevent this? How do we show, because a lot of Jews care about improving the world, and they care about the plight of suffering people. The truth of the matter is, if you are an American or European Jew, right, whatever it is, and you're watching BBC, you're watching CNN, and you see how they cover Israel. I mean, I've been there during some times. I went to school there for 2 years, and you watch that, and you're like, "What are you talking about?" It's totally not true. I remember there was a guy. He's a comedian. He said he dated this Israeli girl, and he said the first time he went to Israel, he thought the directions would be like, you're gonna land. When you hear sporadic gunfire, you're gonna make a left. Then you go and you go to Israel, and it's a totally normal country, and all these things are. But you don't see that. How do you expect these people not to have this feeling of that Israelis are just killing Palestinians right, left, and we're these terrible people, and it's not a democratic country, and all that? So how do we prevent it? So there are 2 forms of anti-Semitism. Okay, there's what's called Haman anti-Semitism, and Haman anti-Semitism wants to just kill Jews. He doesn't really care, what you believe, whatever it is. He just wants to kill. He wants to kill Jews. So the Nazis, for example, are an example of Haman anti-Semitism. They didn't care if you're a communist or a capitalist, if you were religious Jew, unaffiliated Jew, you were Jew, quarter Jew. They made it in a mathematical equation. I think if a person's grandfather, or great grandfather, a quarter, something like that, whatever it is, then they want to kill you. So when the type of Nazi anti-Semitism or Haman anti-Semitism comes, it's really, really hard for a Jew to join forces with them, because why would a Jew join forces with someone who wants to kill them? The second type of anti-Semitism is what really we're dealing with today, is really the anti-Yachus anti-Semitism. Anti-Yachus, for those who may not know, is the antagonist in the story of Hanukkah. He was the Greek governor, he controlled Israel, and he tried to eradicate Judaism. He didn't try to eradicate Jews. Afterward, there was a whole fight, and we had the war. But originally, his idea was to eradicate Judaism, and this a lot of Jews joined, because the Greeks came in the story of Hanukkah and they said, "Let me make your life better. The Jewish people have this problem, and we're going to improve your life." And so you have Jews joining this movement and they many times think that we're doing it as a favor to Judaism, to Jews and Judaism. Like, for example, the Jews who were involved in communism. A lot of Jews were involved in the startup of communism because they thought we're going to solve this Jewish problem of whatever it is. Karl Marx was Jewish, right? Exactly, yeah, right. His parents were converted to Christianity, but they were two Jews. So many. It's in the story of Hanukkah. So in the story of Hanukkah, bless you. So where are we? So wait, I'll get this. So in the story of Hanukkah, many Jews joined the Greeks. I'm talking about it with a couple guys today. That it's not like there was the Greeks and the Jews. A lot of Jews actually fought with the Greeks. Why? Because they felt that we don't have to renounce Judaism. I'm not giving up my Judaism. I'm not even advocating for the Nazis, the eradication of Jews. I'm trying to help Jews, and actually they'll go as far to say as we're saving Judaism from itself. And they said, Judaism is stuck in the old world. Now, yeah, exactly. Michael J is famous. He made it into no, it's not Michael J. I got. And they say, we're trying to save Jews from themselves, because Judaism is so old, and it's in the stuck in the olden time, the ancient times. This is Greek story of Hanukkah 101. The Greeks came in and said, "Listen, you guys are old, and we're going to help you. You're going to help you in the modern world." And the Jews said, "Thank you very much, but we're doing fine," and they didn't like it. But this is the same thing happened in the 1800s, happened in the 1900s. That people have this philosophy, this line of thinking, that we can be anti-Judaism, or in this case now it's anti-Israel, but I'm not. I'm still a Jew. In fact, it's because I'm Jewish, and it's because I believe in human rights that I'm denouncing the government of Israel. Before we go on, any questions? Anyone in person, online? Anyone have anything to say? Have anything to add? No? Yes? I'm assuming they can hear me, right? You guys can hear me, right? Uh-oh. Did I
Yes.
lose everyone?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yes.
okay. Oh, okay, good. Okay. Everyone was very quiet. So I thought, but I went to sleep. Right? So now, the fact that Antiochus, by the way, now Antiochus was the king of many, the northern Greek kingdom. The fact that he didn't pass any decrees against other practices of other nations. He only passed laws against Shabbos, bris milah, being against Judaic practices, and he didn't outlaw practices in other countries. That one has nothing to do with the other, because those people didn't need saving. God save us from people who think they're doing Jews favors. Throughout our history, all these people were trying to do us favors by bringing us into the modern world or making sure we have a place in the world to come. God save us from these people, because those are the people that cause us the most problem. So basically, the line is, I don't want you dead. God forbid. I don't want you to give up all of Judaism. You just have to get rid of the part of Judaism that's, that doesn't concur with world belief. So look at text number 4. There's Dara Horn in the magazine. The article is called "The Cool Kids." This is page 91. It says Hanukkah anti-Semitism doesn't demand dead Jews, at least not at first. Instead, it demands the destruction of Jewish civilization. This process requires not dead Jews, but Jews who are willing to give up whatever specific aspect of Jewish civilization is deemed uncool. Of course, Judaism has always been uncool, which is why cool people, when they say cool people meaning modern society, find it so threatening, and why Jews who are willing to become cool are absolutely necessary to the Hanukkah style anti-Semitism success. Because imagine no Jews would join the Hellenists. Imagine no Jews would join the communist movement. Then the whole argument that we're trying to save Jews wouldn't work. But now you see, oh look, even some Jews realize that you got to get on the train. In the days of Antiochus, this type of anti-Semitism needed those boys who voluntarily underwent painful genital surgery, because in the story of Hanukkah, just to give context what happened here, in the story of Hanukkah, the Greeks outlawed bris milah. In fact, they felt that circumcision was a terrible thing to do because the human body was perfect, and they invented the Olympics and the Olympiads, or the Olympians, would perform in the nude. So if you're a Jew who wanted to fit in, they literally had plastic surgery to reverse circumcision without anesthesia. So those boys who voluntarily underwent painful genital surgery to prove that Jews weren't the problem, just the barbarity of Jewish law. Hanukkah-style anti-Semitism always promises Jews the kind of nobility, offering them the opportunity to cleanse themselves of whatever the people around them happen to find revolting. They say, come on, give up your beard, give up your yarmulke, give up your Shabbos, and then you can become a lawyer. Then you can become a doctor. Then you can fit in, with the Jones. The Jewish traits designated as repulsive vary by country and time period, but they verbally contradict the specific values that the surrounding culture has embraced as universal. We're trying to make everyone fit in. Thanks to Judaism's inherent uncoolness, there will never be a shortage of Jews willing to comply. So you have like today's modern day college campuses, right? And all the people that are all the big Deazaggers, as they say in Yiddish, the big opinion people. And what do they see? They see Israel's taking advantage of this indigenous population, right? So, and they say, and sometimes the argument is, where does Israel get its right to have a country? From the Balfour Declaration. Oh, but that's a colonialist, that's imperialist. The British had no right to be there. They were colonials, right? The colonists, and it's all imperial. So the very fact that Jews are there, or the Israelis are there, it's wrong altogether. So why can't the Jews have a state? Well, you can have a state, but why should it become at expense of the Palestinians? You know the old joke, right? The Palestinian comes to the UN, right, and he's invited to the UN. The Israeli ambassador comes and he puts his shoes, right? You know, on the podium. So the head of the UN says, "Bang, says, what's going on over here?" You put desecration to the UN. Does that tell you? We know, everyone knows the story in the Bible when Moses was standing by the burning bush. God told him to take off his shoes. So we have a tradition when Moses came back, his shoes were gone. Who took them? A Palestinian. So in order to make sure that a Palestinian doesn't steal my shoes, I'm putting them up here. So the Palestinian delegation jumps up. Another Israeli lie. There were no Palestinians back then. The Israeli says, exactly. And now I can begin my speech, right? So they say, oh, why should the Arabs have 22 countries? Right? No, that wasn't 22 Arab countries. By the way, a totally separate thing. Do you see there's a headline going on? I think it was Detroit or some city in Michigan made an all Muslim city council, right? So they say they can't. It was like congratulating them for diverse. Exactly. So, that's exactly where's the diversity? But to say why, so they said, so the Jews shouldn't have a state at the expense of the Palestinians, right? So so these people they deny hating Jews. It's not about hating Jews. We're trying to protect the unfortunate. We're trying to protect the downtrodden. These people with no right. So someone has to advocate for them. So as long as they have this logic, they're always going to object to the government of Israel. This is the Hanukkah anti-Semitism. We're not against Jews. We're just against Judaism. We're against what Jews are doing. Everyone has a right, so to speak. Everyone has a right to exist. So sadly, a lot of Jews, are very progressive. I don't know if they're progressive, they think that they're helping the Jewish brothers and sisters in the land of Israel. I mean, I'm not talking about American, even in Israel. You have in Israel. So, for example, you have people who fought in the war. Their lives were threatened, and they're advocating to give land away to make Israel less secure. I mean, a lot of these things don't make sense. So when you have people, the head of the BDS, whatever it is, they say, "Oh, we can't be anti-Semites." Some of our biggest supporters are Jewish, and why? Because a lot of these people think that they're doing a good humanitarian thing, but the truth of the matter is, the standard is really a double standard, and what Israel is singled out again, and Israel has made mistakes. All governments make mistakes. For example, there's a whole story now in Israel and in the United States. They did a drone strike. It was just like a month ago, right? They found what? 70 people, right? It was mostly right. Listen, governments make mistakes again, and no one's saying the Israeli army, the Israeli government hasn't made mistakes. But the question is, do you care about all people? Do you care about humanitarian, or is it this one country in this one area? So people that are obsessed, with the Jewish state and unfortunately you couldn't watch the video, but the times that the United Nations singles out Israel for proposed humanitarian violations, talking about a tiny country of 8 million people, maybe almost 9 million people. It's smaller than the size of New Jersey. That should take up so much world. When's the last time you heard that? I don't know, Ivory Coast on the news, or the Congo, right, or Luxembourg, right? You never hear about them. Iceland, right, or Canada, right? What I'm saying. So the fact that it's such a focus, it tells you that something's missing from the sincerity, huh? No, they just came to pick up a book. So it tells you that something's missing from their sincerity of the identity of Christ. Okay. So let's move on here for a moment. Let's get into the arguments for the right for Israel to exist as a Jewish state, a Jewish government. All right, we're on page 93. What is the Jewish claim to the land of Israel? Jewish educators need to come on, man. There you go. So Jewish educators need to clarify, to carefully consider and gain clarity on this issue, because they are positioned to greatly influence future generations. And so this is a very, very important point, this paragraph. That means when your child or someone in your family under your influence, or the truth is anyone, Gentile, Jew, asks you a question on this subject, you can't stammer, you can't hesitate, you have to answer to the point. No holding back. Because if people sense that we're not sure, that our opinion is being formulated by what everyone else says, then that's it, we're lost. We have to be very clear about the right of Israel to exist and where does that right come from. Let's go through some common arguments. Okay, exercise 3.1. What's the basis of the Jewish right to Israel? Torah. What else? No? Chime in. Elizabeth, I don't hear you. Too quiet.
What's the question again?
On page 93.
Unfortunately,
what's the base?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the book in front of me. I was looking for it, and I can't find it online.
The dog ate your, no, it's not, the textbook is not online. Elizabeth says the dog ate her homework.
I got to pick up the book tomorrow, hopefully.
Oh, you didn't have the book?
No.
Oh, your book is here. Oh.
Yeah.
Ah, your book's here. Ah,
yeah.
You never picked up the book, so the dog couldn't even eat in your homework.
Right. So
Historical.
I've been using it online, but I couldn't find it today.
Right, yeah, because we didn't send it out. We only send out lesson 1, lesson 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So so the question is, what's the basis of Jewish right to Israel? List 3 commonly cited reasons in the order of frequency in which they are encountered. So Ira said Torah. So Glenn, what do you say?
Historical records.
Historical records. So so you're saying
Archaeological,
archaeological
the
evidence.
transcripts, they
Ellen.
all prove that Israel was a country alive and well, starting 2,000 years.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, we're gonna go even further back than 2,000 years ago. But yeah, Ellen, what you want to chime in?
You took my, you've already said them.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry?
Well, certainly biblical. I mean, Jews were promised the land of Israel.
Okay, so we have a very, very religious people, biblical, right? So first we're going to get to the common ones. And then we'll go to the biblical ones, okay? So number one of the arguments is international law. What do you mean? You had the Balfour Declaration. You have, what is it, in 1971, right after World War I, the Ottoman Empire fell apart, and the British Empire was controlling the Middle East, and the League of Nations basically said, you decide what to do with Palestine, right? So the Balfour Declaration said, the quote over there is, His Majesty's government view would favor the establishment in Palestine of a national homeland for the Jewish people. This was it's called the British Mandate for Palestine. That was 1922 under the League of Nations. League of Nations preceded the United Nations. Then 1947, the United Nations, by a vote of I think it was 56 nations there. Then 33 nations approved it. 13 voted against it, and 10 abstained. So you go to somebody. What's your problem here? We're international law. That's one. Another argument is, I'm surprised no one brought it up. No, I'm surprised you guys didn't bring this up. Jewish survival. After the Holocaust, people said, listen, but what happened during the Holocaust? Jews had nowhere to go. And that includes the United States. The famous was almost 1,000 Jews I think it was in St. Louis, turned back. Right? So my grandfather went to Canada. Why? Some Jews went to Cuba. So before the Castro days. So it was, and in fact, I think in the Israeli Constitution, it mentions the fact that the Jews would always have a place to go. The line is the catastrophe which recently befell Jewish people, the massacre of millions of Jews in Europe, was another clear demonstration of the urgency of solving the problem of its homelessness by reestablishing the land of Israel, the Jewish state, which would open the gates of the homeland wide to every Jew, confer upon the Jewish people the status of a fully privileged member of the Commonwealth of Nations. And the third one, which was mentioned by Glenn, is history. What do you mean? You think we just happen to show up and put down our flag and say, this ain't the Wild West where we just came and said, oh, we're setting up camp here? Well, we've been here do a little homework. The archaeological evidence going back 2,500 years. Go to City of David. City of David, the city of, that's literally 2,500 years old. Well, you want to come and tell us that? But the Jews, that kingdom was destroyed. Yeah, but even when the Jewish people were under foreign rule, there were always Jews there. Even when the Jewish people were in exile, there were always, a couple thousand Jews there at its lowest point. So what do you mean? We're not establishing a new government. That's what the United States did. We reestablished our homeland. We were here. Some of us left. Now we're back. That's the and even when we were gone, we've always thought of Jerusalem. You open up the prayer book. We talk about Jerusalem. The Midas 3 times a day, and I think the count is we mention Jerusalem almost 100 times a day, or going back to Israel, going back to Jerusalem. So those are usually the best. I mean, the 3 arguments made that we make, right? International law, Jewish survival, and okay. So some say if we do a better job learning about it, sharing our information with children and students, and also tell people about the hypocrisy of double standard of the haters of Israel, and underlying, showing them anti-Semitism, that'll make a big difference. But here's the problem: for each one of this, there's a counter argument. Let's go first of all with international law. We all know, it's almost like in 1917, whatever it is, or 1948, the world decided, okay, now we're going to be righteous. What happened before? What the Americans did to the Indians and the Australians did to the Aborigines, right? And we're not going to talk about that. We're going to start history from this point on. In fact, now, there's a whole argument. Again, I'm not going to get political, everything else.
Europeans did to the
Right. I don't mean American, but yeah, right. I mean, you go to Mexico, you see all the Mayan and Aztec. Where are all those people? We killed them all. I mean, Europeans, Spanish conquistadors came. If it wasn't, wasn't disease, it was a sword. I mean, look at South America. I mean, wherever you go. But K-19, whatever it is, and that's when we decided, we're going to be nice. We're going to be nice now. So a lot of people now talking about, for example, teaching American history the way, that happened. Because when we were kids, you learn American history. It's all, you learn about slavery, but we didn't learn about it. We did anything bad to the Indians, right? Right. The way we learned it was we came here. We had a right to it. They were in the way. We killed them.
We bought the land, and then for some reason they wanted it back. We had to argue.
Right. So now the people are more open-minded and progressive and everything else. They say, well, that's not an argument. So the people who were colonialists and the people who were oppressors gave you the right to oppress other people. Look at text number 5. Phyllis Bennett, she writes in an article, I'm Jewish, I fight anti-Semitism, and I support Palestinian rights. She says she was growing up. Yeah, sorry?
I just laughed.
From what? Text number 5?
For the fact that she's sounds like she's a self-hating Jew.
Yeah. Well, think about it. Read text number 5 and see why she says that. Her whole identity of Judaism was about supporting Israel. And if she didn't learn about Torah and tradition and all that. It wasn't God, it was Zionism. My own break with Zionism came in the mid-20s when Theodore Herzl was going around to get support for the state of Israel, and he went to Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes was a financier, and he was a big builder in the British Africa, the South Africa and all that. And he was a believer in the British imperialism and and superiority of the Anglo-Saxon race. So when she hears that Herzl went to this guy and he wrote what are the words? He wrote that he said that Israel is going to be like something colonial because he wanted to get his. Well, we can argue, and historians have argued, did he mean it? Did he say it just to get his approval? Whatever it is, but that's what it means to be Israel. To go and occupy someone else's land, to kick out an indigenous people. And, I mean, you can understand why. Well, I don't give a hoot what international law says. I mean, there's a story. A little late, but there's a story where a guy went to. Was it Truman? Or I forgot what it was. No, it was right after the war. I think it was in New York. I can't remember. And he was trying to help Jews get a visa, and he was trying to get this guy who was a very big, square person, to fudge something to do with visas. I read the story a long time ago, and he said, "What? You want me to break the law?" So the guy says, "I'm a lawbreaker. According to German law, I should be killed. I'm a lawbreaker. I'm standing here before. I'm breaking the law. So if we're going to follow the law, all millions of people are going to die." Which they did. So I'm asking you to understand. So, if the law is inherently immoral, then the whole argument of international law is a bad argument. If that's what you view it. Any questions over there? Where are we? Counter arguments. So we said the declaration is immoral, right? That's not a good argument. Or it's not a good enough argument. And by the way, for Jewish people who have a long history, just the fact that some Gentiles decided to say, okay, that's not a good argument. Right? I mean, look at the story of Purim, right? Achashverosh decided one day to kill the Jews, one day to let the Jews live, right? Mordechai had to act very quickly in order to do things. Why? Because what if Achashverosh decided to get drunk again? All right, let's kill a Jew. So the argument of international law is not a good argument. Any questions before we go to the next one? Yes, no? If silence is admittance? Okay, the next thing. Let's say the Jewish people need a place to be. No one kills them. Who said it has to be Israel? Do you know that they were offering Herzl Uganda?
Yes.
Go to Uganda, right? So why does it have to be Israel? Why do you have to displace the Palestinians? Because you have a problem. That's it. Right? You're no. Why is it my problem? These two Persians. The joke is with Persians because Persians officially are very cheap. Come to a doctor. Doctor says to one Persian, says, "What's the problem?" He says, "I have a nickel stuck in my throat." Because okay, we can fix that. Go to the other Persian. What's your problem? It's my nickel. Right? So you need a land to survive. Why is it this guy's problem? Right? So that can be the argument. In fact, you can make an argument that having all the Jews in one country is actually counterproductive for Jewish survival. It makes it a lot easier to kill the Jews. Pre-6-Day War, right? Everyone thought the Jews are gone. In fact, the Talmud says that one of the biggest blessings of the Jews that were dispersed in the diaspora is that it made it almost impossible to kill all the Jews. Thank God there were Jews in the United States. Thank God there were Jews other places in the 30s and 40s. Imagine all the Jews were in Europe. Thank God there were Jews with the Russians, even though the Russians were bad. So that itself was also not a good argument. A good enough argument. It's nice, but it's not. Number 3. I mean, it's a strong argument, history, But just because 2,000 years ago, you had a government there, now you can just come back and take it? I mean, are we going to tell the Greeks they have the right to take back Egypt because they ruled it? Right? And what about the Romans? Could the Dutch go to New York, back to the Americans and say, I don't like that, the trade we made. New York was a trade, right? The English owned an island. Right? Right. And and the Jews and New York, and they traded the British and the Dutch. And you can say, the Jews weren't even the original inhabitants of the land of Israel, with the land of Canaan. Fine, but the fact of the matter is, you want to go history. The problem with the historical argument is, everyone who makes that argument is going to start wherever they please. Let's take the English, right? English. The English. Do you know where English comes from? If I remember correctly, well, the English were really French. Yeah, they were originally French, and before that, it was the what?
Celtics, the pagans.
The Celtics, pagans, and the Romans, and the Normans. I can't remember. Oh, the Normans. Okay, before that it was the pagans, and there was the Romans, right? And whatever it is. And the Romans came and conquered the indigenous population. You wouldn't go to an Englishman today and say, "What right do you have to be here?" Oh, history, really? Well, you decided to start history from at what point? Even this argument is not a good argument. Remember, we said you have to have an answer that's gonna. You ready, guys? Here goes. Yeah. So the argument. I'm trying to think over here. I wrote it down over here. Where's the history of England? I had it written down here. If I find it, the answer lies in education. The key is education. We have to teach our kids, and we have to know for ourselves what it means Torah and Jews and the land of Israel. That's what it's about. It's not that there's Torah, and it's not that there's Jews, not that there's Judaism in the land of Israel. That's not the way it is. And the truth of the matter is, if a person received, let's go back to this Phyllis lady. If she received a proper Jewish education, what Judaism is, she would never write such an article. So it's important to fulfill our obligation, the Rebbe says, to educate our fellow Jews, and the importance of the land of Israel. Every single Jew has a neshama, and that neshama binds them number one to each other, and number two to the land of Israel. And when we bury a person, we put in the dirt from the land of Israel, because that connection is there. Every Jew cares about the land of Israel. Now, it can manifest itself in a positive way. It can manifest itself in a negative way. And if a Jew has a negative opinion about Jews and Israel, and it's obviously negative, I mean, not criticizing the government, but then we're failing that person. We as a Jewish people, we're failing this person to educate them about what a Jew's job is and how the land of Israel focuses. So this Phyllis lady, she spoke about Theodor Herzl's political Zionism, and she spoke about Tikkun Olam. That's a mistake, because she thinks Judaism is about Tikkun Olam, making the world is this beautiful, peaceful, utopian place. And if the Jews get their land by oppressing and displacing people, then obviously we have to be against the government. That's not what Judaism is. It's a byproduct. I know Tikkun Olam is a good catchphrase, but that's not what Judaism is. And number two, there's a problem with political Zionism also, and that's why she's disenfranchised. Let's explore it. In number one, there's a lot more to Judaism. There's a lot more to Judaism. Judaism has to offer. And when a person understands what Torah is, and it's also, it goes with political Zionism. If we understand what the Torah has to offer and how we can teach it to the next generation, then it's going to deepen our appreciation for Israel, for each other, and how we fit in. Let's go for on a side question. Look at text number 6. Text number 6 is the first commentary to the first verse of the Torah. Is page 95. Rashi says, "Why did we all know that God created the world? Why did God begin with the creation of the world? He said, just in case the nations of the world will say that the Jews stole the land of Israel, so you should know that God gave the land to Abraham. It says in the beginning God created the world. Israel's in the Torah. It's God's world, and He can give it to whoever He wants. As you see in text number 7, that God said, I'm giving you the land. And truth is, this is right away the strongest argument. God gave it to us. Who are you going to go? You have a problem? Go argue with Him. What do you have a problem with us? You with Him. You don't like there are 7 days in the week? You don't like the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west? What do you have a problem with me? Go argue with Him. That's the way it is. That's the way. Now, the problem is that if a person is not religious, you're coming to them with this argument is going to be a little bit. It's going to be a weak argument. Okay, I don't really care about this. So that's why we have to teach them. And to teach them, Jewish education has to start from early. The Torah is not some antiquated book. We're talking about what was it? We're talking about this lesson from I forgot what it was. A modern day lesson that we find it in Torah. All these modern day concepts of psychology and human responsibility, they're all in the Torah. So now people are discovering these things. They're reinventing the wheel. But it's our job to tell everybody, listen here, there's no reason to go run to Timbuktu and to Thailand to discover mysticism and all these ideas. I often use this example when JFK was talking about the Peace Corps, and everybody was praising JFK, how wow, he's such a innovator. He came up with this concept to go help other people in poor, underserved communities. And the Rebbe's talking, it's on video. The Rebbe's talking about it like, what's going on over here? The terrorist said it a long time ago. But instead of people understanding that this richness is in our own culture, our own history, they go look for someone else. Oh, how come you don't have this? I remember this one guy was asking this rabbi. I'm reusing a lot of my stories, and he was saying, "Oh, if Jews don't believe in the New Testament, how are you going to know to love your fellow like yourself?" The rabbi says, "What are you talking about? It's in Leviticus. Like, what are you? Tell me something I don't know, right?" Exactly. So it's very important when you give a person a Jewish education, a Torah education. Automatically included in that is the value for the land of Israel. So you see it. It's not a political position, but if you come and say this is the way it is. This is the way it is. The land of Israel naturally belongs to the Jewish people. You don't start getting in with historical arguments. Look what the Rebbe wrote to President Shazar. It's text number 8. He writes to him, the people complain to the Rebbe, how come he always uses the biblical right land? Why do I mix God into the picture? After all, those who fought for the creation of the state, those who led it, those who currently direct it, and its authorized representative, they all proclaim and take pains to say this. 1948. The Rebbe says it's a false narrative. Nothing new happened in 1948. The land of Israel was liberated in 1948. But it's not like the land of Israel became Jewish in 1948. And that entity was established based on the agreement of nations. And has no strength and justification in terms of quoting Rashi before, you are thieves. A claim raised by the Arabs and the Vatican. The Vatican only started having what's it called? Diplomatic relations with Israel in 1996. It was 50 years, almost 50 years. And United Nations, some Jews as well. This is why you can't come with those arguments. You got to come and say the land belongs to us because God gave it to us. Now, doesn't mean you're going to win every argument, but this is what you got. This is what you got to say. This is what we got to teach our kids. Forget about what the Gentiles. Right? We spoke about last week. We're not talking. We don't care about them anymore. We want to hate. We got to educate ourselves. Yeah, that's what this class is about. We got to educate Jews. The land of Israel belongs to us. Why? Because God created the world. He created 7 days, nature. It belongs to us. Over. It's not. It's we need to emphasize that not only is that Israel is a land of promise, for Jews to have a place to live. It's the promised land. We need to tell people about God came to Abraham and he said, from now on, I'm the boss, right? And I decide, for example, I'm the father. My daughter's getting a license. We'll see if she passes soon, right? Let's say, God willing, my other kids get their license. Daddy, I want the car. Daddy, I want the car. It's my car. Sarah, you can have the car now. And then I take it away from Sarah and I give it to her. It's my car. Wow, you're terrible. No, that's just the way it is. That's the way it is. It's as simple as that. And when we start getting into historical arguments, when we start getting into, the Rebbe refused to use the concept of the UN gives us, really? You need the UN to tell you have the right to live where you want? What kind of insanity is that? And if there was if the Palestinians continue to destroy archaeological evidence in Israel, what, that's going to take away our right? Get out of here. We live there. It's our land because that's the way God created it. You don't like it? Okay. That's not but if we teach our children and we teach ourselves the inherent connection between God, Torah, I only have two hands, and Jewish, I need a hand, and Jewish people, right? The Bermuda Triangle, God, Torah. So then there's no, and we got to teach the kids in Israel also. And this, by the way, is going to answer some other questions. Let's go. A deeper claim. Sorry, Judaism teaches. Judaism teaches that there's a deeper spiritual quality behind every phenomenon, including the affairs of humanity. The voices, Jewish or otherwise, that loudly question a Jewish claim to the Jewish homeland are no exception to this principle. The spiritual reality that lurks unknowingly behind our argument is like this. The Rebbe spoke about this. If Judaism is a spiritual religion, right? It is. And you don't need to be in Israel to practice Judaism. We've done it. We've been out of Israel more than we've been in Israel. So why do you need a land? Are you going crazy? Stay in New York. Stay in Brooklyn. Stay in Poland. Well, it's not. Jews don't need a land. So first of all, before we get to that answer, let's ask a question. Any of you guys have a problem with the first Rashi, text number 6? What is the book of Torah for? Who's the book of Torah for? Text number 6 is all about if the nations of the world, right, will claim. What is the page? No? 95. Who's the Torah who's the Torah directed at? The Jews, right? It's a book of code for the Jews. Yeah, and our job to teach the Gentiles, but it's a given to the Jews, the language of the Jews. What's the first thing we talk about in the Torah? An answer to the Gentiles. Don't you think it's weird? The Torah starts off with an answer to the Gentiles. If God gave us the land of Israel, we should care about what they think. Text number 6, right? Text number 6, it says, why did God start the Torah with creation? We don't need the Torah to tell us that God created the world. We know that God created the world. But just in case, but not just in case, when the nations will say that the Jews stole the land of Israel, so now we have something to answer them. We should care about what the Gentiles think. Who cares? You don't like it? Since when do Jews care about what Gentiles think? If we cared about what Gentiles think, we wouldn't shake a branch and a lemon. We wouldn't eat crackers. We wouldn't swing chickens over our head. We wouldn't, we wouldn't put black boxes on our head. We wouldn't wear strings out of our pants. I can go on, right? Since when do we care what Gentiles think? And let's say it's a good question. So put it somewhere else in the Torah. The 24 books in the Torah. The first thing we care about the Gentiles. Oh, here it is. By the way, I found it. The note about England. I wrote it over here. The current royal family is England descendants come from a Germanic people who overthrew the Norman rulers in the 12th century. The Normans themselves were invaders from France, conquered the land from Anglo-Saxons, who in turn conquered it from the Romans, would rule the land for centuries after invading and subjugating the local inhabitants. Right? That was right? So why do we care? Why do we care what they think? Every single country in the world, one people came and conquered the other. So now you decided to single out one people. I should answer you. It's a stupid argument, right? We're citizens. None of us are from here. The government. We came. We conquered. The British and French had it. We fought them. The people came and they fought the Indians. All of a sudden now you have a problem. If we think about it, it's a very foolish question. Their claim, you stole the land of Israel. Think about it. We should bother. Why should we bother? Let's go. So the answer is like this. This is where surface. Right. So what's a nation? You say, what's an American? American's a guy who lives in the United States, born, grew up, right? Whatever. Pretty much, right? Usually.
Canadians.
Okay, you know what I mean. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but
That's exactly right.
yeah, but they don't count. I'm going to be New Yorker over here. So there's New York, and there's exactly. So a nation is usually defined as you have a people who live in this. No, here we go. There's people who live in this. No, here we go. Here we go. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. So these people who live in this common place, and they come together and they form a government. In our case, full of people by the people, and this common geography binds these people, right? If you're a citizen of Germany, you don't get to vote in the United States. You're not from here. You don't live here, right? In the olden days when the United States was established, if you didn't own land, you couldn't vote. Right? Okay, we're not going to get into the right or wrong of it, but the idea is, that what makes you part of the nation? You're from here. The Jewish people, though, were totally against geography. Where was the Torah given? In the desert. No inhabitants. And not only, it was given outside of the land of Israel. So here you're telling me Judaism cares about the land of Israel. What are you talking about? It wasn't given in the land of Israel. It was given in a place that it's not inhabited. So the question is, Jews shouldn't care about the land. And look at what Rabbi Saadia Gaon says in text number 9. He succinctly puts it, the Jewish people are bound by the Torah, not by a land. In fact, the Romans made this mistake. They thought if we kick the Jews out of Israel, there'll be no more Jews. So we picked up our Torah, we picked up our Gemaras, we left. And when the French burned the Gemaras, we left France. Why? Because without Gemara, without Torah, there's no Judaism. Like I said, Jews have been out of Israel way longer than we've been in Israel. The majority of Jews. There's always been Jews in Israel. So the Rebbe writes, text number 10. The reason why we we survived wasn't due to our strength. Even in the times of King Solomon, page 102, even in the times of King Solomon, which was the apex of Jewish power, so to speak, was never because of, he was a small kingdom compared to Egypt, the Syrian, and Babylonians. And the reason why we survived was not because of a homeland, nor was it an act of statehood or control of our geographic homeland. There's evidence that the vast majority of our history, we live in exile. And it wasn't because of a language. Most of the time, the Jewish people didn't speak Hebrew. Even in First Temple times, the majority of Jews spoke Aramaic. The Gemara is in Aramaic. The Zohar is in Aramaic. And after Aramaic, the Jews spoke Arabic. And after Arabic was, I don't know, Latin and Yiddish, whatever it is. And it's not some culture, right? Because some Jews eat jachnun and some Jews eat bagels. It's not, it's some eat Moroccan fish and some eat gefilte fish. And things change from era to era. There's only one thing that binds the Jewish people. It's Torah. That's it. That's the last paragraph. The only remaining consideration, which is the sole fact that has remained constant throughout the ages in all lands, under the full diversity of circumstances, is the Torah. Our Torah shapes who we are. So now we can understand the argument, the argument of the Gentiles. So everyone else, what gives them their identity, their land? Right? You're Canadian. That means if you're from the land of Canada, you're Mexican, you're from the land of Mexico. But Jews, you're Jewish, but you're not from Israel. That means when the Jewish people went and they changed the rules. They said, I don't have to be from there for it to be my land. We're a nation without it. In fact, sometimes you get too caught up in the land, you actually forget about your spiritual identity. Because if you're a person who lives in Israel, you're not exempt from doing all the mitzvot, right? Just because you're Israeli, you speak Hebrew, doesn't mean you don't have to put on tefillin, keep Shabbos. You're not more Jewish because you live in Israel. So now we understand. So now the question is, so why is the land of Israel so important? We don't need it. Think about it, right? Do you put on tefillin different or light Shabbos candles or do anything different in Israel than outside of Israel? Why is the land of Israel so important? Let's look at text number 11. The Rebbe writes something very powerful here. He says, because like this. Hashem creates the world. Why? Why did Hashem create the world? Hashem created the world to give us the ability to do mitzvot in the physical realm. We have a spiritual mission in a material realm. The ultimate goal, second paragraph, the ultimate goal of the Jewish people's divine service is to turn the tangible world into a home for godly revelation. To the point that God's holiness dwells specifically in the physical reality. For this reason, the majority of Torah commandments involve physical activities. So the fulfillment of Torah mitzvah installs sanctity into tangible materials. It was therefore critical to provide the Jews with the land of Israel, a physical land, and to provide them with an abundant mitzvot that can be performed exclusively with the land, like Shemitah, and there are many mitzvot that are agricultural mitzvot. For this expresses the entire goal of the Jewish people and the purpose of the Torah to conquer, sort of quote unquote, the physical dimension of the world and transform it into a home for God. So a typical religion, so to speak, you don't need a land. You can be religious wherever. But Judaism is different than a typical religion. Because a regular religion, we'll call it, they're trying to, so to speak, ascend, right? Become more lofty. Judaism is all about bringing God down to earth. So we need we need a land. Judaism doesn't just concern itself with the spiritual. The idea is we're trying to make the line of the Rebbe Rashab is God made the spiritual, physical world, and our job is to take the physical world and make it spiritual. That's what we're trying to do. Where are you? So we have to take the physical leather. You have to light, that the actual wax. So God created a world. There should be a space, a physical space, so that a person can perceive godliness. So when you do something because Hashem says it, you're bringing God down. These physical actions, when you put on, I'm using tefillin because it's a very, vivid, with a box out of your head. I mean, you can't get more vivid than that. So what you're really doing is you're expressing how the entire world is a vehicle for godliness, because when you take the money, for example, tzedakah, and you take the money you made, you could spend on yourself, and you're giving it to someone, right? What you're doing is you're showing that this is a physical thing, and this physical thing is being done because Hashem said to do it. So now you're making the physical world a vehicle for God's presence. So this explains like this. If the Jewish people had no land, in theory, could there be Judaism? Yeah, maybe. But it would take away the point where God created the world. God created this material world, which is seemingly very ungodly, because He wanted us to bring it down to the lowest realm. This is why He had to give us a land. So in a world without a Jewish land, the message would be that you have the Jew and you have Torah or God. They're not compatible with the physical world. It's it's two separate things. That's not the message that the Torah is trying to send is you could be a normal person, a worldly person, and be a God-fearing and observant person. They're not two separate things. So therefore, it doesn't make a difference how many Jews live in the land of Israel. That's not important. The fact of the matter is that there is a Jewish land. There's a land that represents that the material world and the spiritual world are not total opposites. They can be compatible. One with the other. Now let's go back to the question: why did the Torah start off with an argument against the Gentiles? Right? Why the Gentiles the first thing? It's not an argument against the Gentiles. It's explaining to us the very reason of creation. God didn't create us for us to run up Mount Sinai and to elope with God and to, that's not what it's about. It's about being a regular person, having a job, living a regular life, and being a moral, ethical person. Why? Because the Torah says, because Hashem says. And you're taking the physical proceeds of your earnings and you're giving tzedakah, you're buying kosher food, you're doing things because the Torah says. And that's what it is. So why does the land of Israel belong to Jews? Not because of historical argument, because God said so. Because that's the way we because without it, put it this way, in other words, without it, we couldn't exist. We couldn't exist, we couldn't fulfill our purpose in creation. So the land of Israel is very important, right? We have tefillin, Shabbos candles, Sefer. Is that bars of gold? No. Yes, please. Exactly. I just want to put it up there to get your attention. So in conclusion, right? Well, let's finish up. Ooh, I'm late. So there's a famous poet, Rabbi Yehuda Levi. He lived in Spain in the 1000s, 1100s, and he wrote, "Libi Mizrach, v'ani b'ma'ariv." My heart's in the east, and I'm in the west. He lived in Spain, meaning that although he was physically present in Spain, he all he cared about was the land of Israel. And he said, "How can I taste what I eat? And how can it be savored while yet Zion is still under the control of Rome?" So the fact is like this. Where are we? Yeah, here. So how do we rectify it? We rectify it by teaching people, by not hesitating, by saying the way things are, the way it is. The land of Israel belongs to us because God gave it to us in order for us to do what we got to do. It's not extra. It's not that you could be Jewish somewhere else. No, in order to be Jewish, in order to exist as I exist, I need the land. I need the land of Israel. So are you going to fight everybody? Are you going to convince everybody? No, but our job is to give people a strong Jewish education and to understand that Judaism and Torah is not separate from each other. And when you show people that you can be observant Jew and you have love for God, love for the Jewish people, and love for Judaism, then automatically love for the land of Israel it comes. So there's always going to be people that don't love the land of Israel. Yes, it's true, and we wait for Mashiach to come until that anti-Semitism is eradicated. But until then, we can't concern ourselves what they say. We have to know for ourselves what being a Jew means and how the land of Israel factors in. And then when someone asks, like I said before, don't start with archaeological proof and historical proof and Balfour declarations and all that Jewish survival. We survived with the land of Israel. We survived without the land of Israel. The land of Israel is part of my being. I cannot be without the land of Israel. God created me together with the land of Israel. So even if I'm not here, but for example, my child is not present, still connected. A Jew in the land of Israel are intrinsically connected. That's the way it is. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to play the video for key points. Hopefully it plays. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to mute myself.
Lesson 3, the Promised Land. 1. Anti-Semitism seeks legitimacy from the most prestigious authority of any given era. At present, this authority is the pursuit of human rights. Consequently, many of today's anti-Semites focus overwhelmingly on Israel and accuse it of being the ultimate violator of human rights. 2. When Israel is A. demonized, or B. judged with a double standard, or C. when Israel's existence is delegitimized, that challenge exposes itself as an expression of anti-Semitism. 3. When anti-Semites refrain from asserting that they seek to annihilate Jewry, they rarely take issue with Jewish practices and claiming them to be barbaric. Jews can be tempted to join the fight.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know if it's the internet connection. I mean, last week we didn't have an issue. I don't know if it's the video. I don't know if it's the computer. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the internet. We had some issues with the internet here. We had to restart the camera. Okay. So I'll upload it. I'll upload it to YouTube. In the email, I think you can find the lesson videos there as well. Next week is the last week. Next week is actually the very big Hasidic holiday, 19th of Kislev. It celebrates the liberation of the Alter Rebbe from jail. So it's actually called the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus. Look at the two extras on. You have it behind you. Behind you. In the end of the after the chapter, after the key points, you see the double standard spread and also working a definition of anti-Semitism. Very interesting stuff. Next week. So with our friends and our foes, and sometimes we think there's foes that are foes, and can we turn them around? And we'll see that although people have been foes to the Jews before, we can turn them around. We can create better days ahead, and we can hope for the coming of Mashiach. Any questions before we adjourn? Yay, nay?
No. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, sorry for
No problem.
for the poor technical difficulties.
No problem.
We'll blame Comcast. We might need a new computer.
The question is the audio bad for you locally?
No. Here on the computer, it plays perfectly. It's only over the internet.
Bandwidth problem.
The bandwidth problem. Okay, so I'll call. I guess we'll call Comcast. We'll find out what the issue is.
Well,
Violator.
All right.
Comcast will take care of you. It might take them about a month to a month and a half to take care of the problem. But
Okay, so we'll have it ready for the winter course. Maybe by then everyone will come in person. Exactly. All right,
thank you.
guys. All the best. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, good night.